Welcome to the Path Forward podcast. My guest today is Dr. Will Moreland. I'm your host, Augie Ghilarducci, and this is being brought to you by the Second Opportunity Program. Dr. Will and I met through LinkedIn, and I found that for me, LinkedIn has been a wonderful way to build a network since I've gotten out of prison. And so we connected and exchanged some notes back and forth. And when I read his background and his story and what have you, I thought this would be an ideal guest. And he's kind enough today to join us and give us some of his time and some of his story that I think you're going to find interesting and inspirational, which is what we really want to have happen. So, Dr. Will, thank you for joining me today.
No, I appreciate you for having me. I've been looking so forward to having this conversation with you. So thank you so much for the invite.
Let's provide the audience some context around this. Where are you located? What part of the country are you located in?
So I live now for the last 15 years in Phoenix, Arizona. I live in Phoenix, Arizona now.
I think you mentioned that you grew up in Southern California. Is that right?
Yeah, originally from Compton, California. If anyone's heard of that little city nestled right to the south of Los Angeles, grew up there and did all my formidable years in Compton.
And so when you were a young man, what did you enjoy doing, and as far as school or sports or any of those type of things? What did you enjoy as you were growing up?
Yeah, growing up in Compton, I tell people it was a very unique time because I grew up in Compton when Compton was said to literally be the worst city in America, and we were swamped and overwritten with gangs and drugs. But at the same time, Compton to me just represented where my grandmother's house was. That's who I lived with. I was raised by my grandmother and my single mother. And so Compton was this very unique place. You had strong community, but you also had these outside forces that were overshadowing. But as a little kid, I did play sports, and I, like any other kid, I like to ride my bike. I like to hang out with my friends, and even though that could present itself as very dangerous, once again you would just learn how to navigate through these things. I knew what streets not to go down. I knew not to be outside too late. I knew what neighborhoods not to hang in. And so being raised by my grandmother and my single mother, I had a sister that I grew up with in the house, but at grandma's house, there was always, anywhere between 15 to 20 people living at grandma's house because of all different types of personal situations in their life. I did know my father. My father happened to be at that time one of the largest drug dealers in California. And when I was growing up, and I met him for the very first time when I was about 7 years old. He was serving time in the California State Penitentiary, and my mom went to go take me to visit him. And so that was the first interaction that I could remember with my father. And so I've had a pretty unique upbringing that we can get more into.
Well, I'd like to talk about where you went as you're in Compton. You at some point, what you call it, a transition point? Is that the term that you
Yeah,
use?
yeah, transition
So,
point.
so could you walk us through one of the transition points from your youth?
Yeah, so for me, like I said, Compton was a place that was very overwhelming, and especially for a young kid like myself that didn't have a lot of male representation in my life. Once again, I lived in a home that was my grandmother, my mom, my sister. My father wasn't quite there, and so I would say, although I had love in the house and my grandmother, she showered me with love, I still was looking for belonging. I was still looking for a sense of community. And unfortunately, I found that by joining a gang. And so very early on in my life. Around the age of 9 or 10, I joined a gang. I was very active in gang activity, and so from the time I was 10 to the time I was 18, I found myself in and out of trouble with the law. My longest stint at that time, I did about 9 months in a youth detention center. We called it YA in California. And when I was 18, I was in front of the judge and I was facing 6 years. And this judge, I call him one of the first disruptors in my life. He looked at me and he said, "Mr. Moreland, uh, you're headed, you're headed nowhere fast. And if I sentence you today, this record is going to be with you for the rest of your life. This is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to allow you to leave my courtroom, and in 2 weeks I want you to return to my courtroom, and I want you to tell me what you're going to do with your life. Why shouldn't I send you to one of our nice facilities here in California, aka jail?" And to be honest with you, um, I didn't know what I was going to tell this man in 2 weeks. And so when I left that courtroom, I said, you know what? I might as well party and have a good time because in 2 weeks, I'm getting ready to go to jail for 6 years. And that was my mindset. But as fate would have it, 3 days before I was to return to court, I was walking in the mall and a Army recruiter by the name of Corey Oliver came up to me and he asked me, "Have you ever thought about going to the military?" And I knew at that moment, I didn't fully understand what was happening in my life, but I knew at that moment that that was an opportunity. I said to myself in that moment, I bet you if I told the judge I was going to the Army, he would think that was a good idea. And so I told Corey, I said, you know what? Let's go. And he was as shocked as I was. He later told me, he says, "Man, I've walked up this mall for 2 years and I've never put anybody in the Army. I've walked up here for 2 years and never have put anybody in the Army because in my neighborhood, people didn't go to the Army, not especially not young guys like me." And so I never forget, we get to the recruiting station and I'm signing up and I explain the situation to him. I say, "Hey, I'm due in court in a couple of days. Will you go with me and let the judge know that this is real, that I've actually signed up?" He says, "Okay." He goes with me. We go back to court. I tell the judge. The judge says, "Mr. Moreland, I believe you've made a wise choice. I wish the best for you. I hope I never see you again." And that was the transitional point for me as an 18-year-old. This was the very first time that I was going to leave the state of California. This was the first time that I was ever going to get on an airplane. Um, for the majority of my life, for 18 years of my life, I didn't go more than 20 miles outside of Compton, California. So I lived a very limited and what I would call a very box life. Like that was all I knew. And so here it is, the very first time that I'm getting ready to get on a plane. I'm getting ready to leave the state of California. It was a bit overwhelming. And after I finished my basic training, the Army played even a bigger trick on me and they sent me over to Germany. And so, in a 5 month period for 18 years, I had never traveled anywhere. And now, within a 5 month period, I had been to like 3 different states. And now I'm in a brand new country that was totally overwhelming for me.
So I have to ask, had you, prior to standing in front of the judge where he said, "I'm going to give you 2 weeks," and so on and so forth, and then you walk in the mall, but had you at any point in your young life at that time, had you thought about the military as an option for you?
That's a great question. So here's a funny story. A year or two prior to that, the recruiters had came to our school, and the deal was that if you took the ASVAB test in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll never forget, if you would take the ASVAB test, you could have the rest of the day off. It would take you about 2 hours to do it, and you could have the rest of the day off. And I ended up taking the ASVAB test that day. Never considered going to the military. I just wanted to get out of school. And so when Corey took me to the recruiting station, he put my name in the database, and sure enough, my name popped up. And I had forgot all about it. I didn't even remember that I had taken the test. And he's like, "You're already in our system." And I'm like, "Well, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Y'all did come to my school, and yeah, I did to take the test." And I told him, I said, "Wait a minute, man. I was really playing around. I think I went ABC 1, 2, 3 on that test, man. Let me take the test again." And he says, "Well, I don't know what you did, but you scored very well. And the way the test works, if I allow you to take it now and you score less than what you scored last time, we have to take this lesser score." He says, I'm pretty safe with where you are right now, with the score that you have right now." And I'm trusting Corey. I say, "Hey man, if you say it's a good score, I'll go with that." And so yeah, man, that's a great question. I had never really thought about it. I had only taken the test, and to be honest with you, I remember laughing at the guy when he came and administered the test, and he was telling us a great opportunity the military was. And I was like, "Man, I'm not going to nobody's military, man." But I did end up taking that test, man.
So you're a very young man, long ways from home. And could you share a little bit about that experience and how it helped shape what you're doing now, and how you've rebounded from some of those challenges you had faced?
Yeah. So I get to Germany, and Germany from Compton is about 8,000 miles away. And the problem that I had was, physically, I was 8,000 miles away, but mentally, I was still in Compton. The way that I saw the world, the way that I handled problems, I still handled it like I was in Compton. And I'll give you an example of this. In Compton, one of the questions that you're asked the most, or asked a lot, is a statement where someone would walk up to you and say, "Where are you from? Where are you from?" And in Compton, what they were asking you was, "What's your gang affiliation? What gang are you with?" Well, in the Army, you have all these people that are literally from around the United States. And so they would walk up to me and they would say, "Moreland, where are you from?" I thought they were asking me what gang I was from. I didn't know they were asking me geographically where I was located. And so I would meet them with hostility, and I would meet them with aggression, because I thought they were trying to roughhouse me. I thought they were trying to sweat me. I thought they were trying to run up on me. And so even though I was 8,000 miles away, mentally, I was still operating like I was in Compton. And that got me initially into a lot of trouble. Literally, the first 2 months that I was in the Army, I got into maybe about 4 or 5 fights. And the last fight that I got into, it was a serious fight. I injured another soldier very badly, and they were getting ready to kick me out the Army. And as I was going through the process of getting ready to get kicked out the Army, I ran into who I call my second disruptor, and his name was Command Sergeant Major Babs. He was the highest ranking non-commissioned officer on our base. And I was in his office, and he says, "Moreland, just similar to the judge," he says, I've read your record. I know that you come from Compton." He says, if I kick you out of the Army today, where are you going to? What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I guess I'll be back on the streets, Sergeant Major. I guess I'll be back on the block." And he says, "You're absolutely right. That's where you'll be. And what do you think will happen to you if you end up back on the block?" I said, more than likely, I'll end up in jail or end up dead. He says, you're absolutely right. He says, right now, you have an opportunity to change your life. You have an opportunity to be better. You have an opportunity to become a whole different person. What are you going to do with this opportunity? And I said, to be honest with you, Sergeant Major, I don't know what to do with this opportunity. And he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to kick you out the Army. I'm going to allow you to come work for me. You're going to become my personal assistant. And he allowed me to become his personal assistant. And what this did for me was give me the opportunity, because that following week, he called me into his office and he says, all right, Moreland, I want you to tell me where you want to be in the next 5 years of your life. Where do you want to be? Now, up until this point, no one had ever asked me a question like this, because when I was younger, everybody told me, you're not going to even see 18. You're not going to even see 20. You're going to be in jail or you're going to end up dead. And so I had never thought futuristically. I had never had a vision for my life. I had never seen myself at 25. I had never seen myself at 30. I had never seen myself having a family, having children. I didn't have a vision for that, because I honestly believed that I was going to either be in jail or be dead. And so he says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, I don't know. He says, well, I want you to go home and I want you to think about it. And I want you to come back just like the judge. And I want you to tell me where you see yourself. And so I went home that weekend and I started to think about my future for the very first time. And so I got back to his office on Monday. I said, Sergeant Major, I don't know exactly, but I do know I want to be the best soldier I can be. That's what I want to do. 5 years from now, I want to say that I'm the best soldier that I can be. He says, if that's your goal, I can help you with that. And so that's when he partnered me up with a gentleman by the name of Sergeant Sane. And he called Sergeant Sane into the office and he says, I want you to become Moreland's mentor. He wants to become the best soldier he can be, and I want you to help him do that. And so, in this short amount of time, I was introduced to what having a vision looks like. I was introduced to setting goals, and I was introduced to the power of mentorship and how powerful having a mentor in your life could be. And so Sergeant Sane began to work with me, and he says, okay, if you want to become the best soldier you can be, here's a list of things that you need to do. You need to become a learner. You need to become a student. We're going to get you into college, where the Army pays for you to go to college. So you're going to take advantage of that. So I'm going to help you get enrolled in college. These are things that I had never thought about before. And because of this mentor, this is another transitional point in my life where I begin to change my life around.
So let's, if we can, move to when you discharged from the service. And did you return home to Compton?
Actually, no. So by the time it was time for me to get out the military, by going back to school and by getting enrolled into college, I was in a speaker's class. I was taking speech 101, and there was a lady in there by the name of Miss Copeland, and she heard me speak, and she says, "Will, you're a dynamic speaker. You're an amazing speaker." And she handed me this book, and it was a book by Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, and it was all about success, and it was about setting goals and setting vision. And she says, I really think you could do this. I really think that you could be a spectacular speaker. And I started reading that book, and that book started exposing me to the world of personal development and leadership development. And so for the next several years, I started just reading everything I could get my hand on: the science of success, Think and Grow Rich, the magic of thinking big. I started listening to cassette tapes and listening to Dennis Waitley and listening to Zig Ziglar and Jim Rome and Les Brown and Tony Robbins and all these gurus around success, and really just shaping my mind. And so around the time it was time for me to get out the military, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I knew I wanted to travel the world and teach people these success principles. And so I got out the Army. I decided I was going to start a consultant company. Really didn't know what that looked like, really didn't have all the know-how. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And so when I got out the military, my wife and I, we decided to stay in Germany. So I ended up staying in Germany about 9 more years, for a total of 15 years. And I started my consultant company there.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit based on, knowing what I've read and our brief conversation before this started. So at some point, it wasn't just about public speaking. At some point, you decided to put words on paper. So would you share with us, with the audience, what it was like to sit down and write, not just one book? I think you wrote several books, but what was that like? What was the motivation to have you want to do that? And how intimidating was it when you sat down, you said to yourself, I got all these great things I want to say, but I'm looking at this blank paper, and how does this come together? Could you share that a little bit? Because I know on the inside there are a lot of men that I was locked up with that talked about, they want to write a book at some point. So what was that like?
When I was 35 years old, I sat down and I wrote what I call my goal sheet. And I wrote 101 things that I wanted to accomplish before I died. 101 things. And on this sheet, one of it was to write a best-selling book. But when it came to writing the book, it was very intimidating because I worried if I did have the vocabulary, I worried, did I have the sentence structure? I'll share this with you. Growing up, um, I had a big speech impediment and I stuttered, and I also am dyslexic. And so when it comes to writing, when it comes to putting thoughts together, it's really a daunting task for me. And so when it came to writing, initially it was very intimidating. But then I got some advice, and that advice was, are you trying to impress people? Are you trying to help people? If you're trying to help people, then you don't need to write a perfect book. Now, if you're trying to impress people, then you need to worry about your sentence structure. You need to worry about if the period is in the right place, if the comma is in the right place. To me, my books are just an extension of my experiences. And so if I experience something, if I learn something, if I develop something and it's helped me and I think it can help you, then I'll just put it in a book so it can get to more people. And that's how I think about my book writing now.
So how many books have you written?
And at last count, we're at about 50 plus.
On LinkedIn, you refer to yourself as a Civility Pro. Will you tell our audience what your definition of civility is? And then, if you don't mind, tell us how it's impacted your life.
A simple definition of civility for all of our listeners to remember it is just the intentional way you want to treat others. It's just being intentional about how you want to treat others in a positive way. And so all of us have heard the golden rule, do unto others as you will have them do unto you. And I know a lot of times that may be challenging, um, because when we think about treating others as we would like to be treated, we also have to realize that there's a lot of things that happen to people that make them react a certain way. I remember growing up in Compton, and one of the biggest words, when I think back, one of the biggest words that I see cause so much trouble was this word disrespect. Disrespect. I've seen people get into fights. I've seen people get stabbed. I've seen people get shot. I've seen people get killed off of that word, disrespect. He disrespected me. She disrespected me. And when I think about civility and how it correlates to that, in those moments, what civility does is allows me to pause in that moment. When I'm thinking someone is disrespecting me, civility says, let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at the bigger picture. As an example, somebody bumps into you. Were they really bumping into you to disrespect you? Or was that something normal that happens in a crowded club? If your framework, if those words that you're saying, because every time something happens to us, words start going off in our head. And so once again, when somebody bumps into you, if the words that start going off in your head is, oh, he's disrespecting me. Oh, he thinks I'm a chump. Oh, he thinks I'm scared of him. Oh, she thinks I'm scared of her. Then you're going to respond or you're going to react from those words. But if in my brain, my words are, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, they didn't do that intentionally, then my reaction is going to be completely different. And I always like to use the example of riding on the freeway. We're all going the same direction in life. We're just going to different destinations. And as we're driving in these cars, we all want to get to our destination safely. And so we have these things that we call rules of the road. So, for instance, if I want to get over into another lane, I put on my signal to let the other person know that I want to get over. We call that common courtesy. We call that creating a safe environment so both of us can continuously keep traveling on this road to our destination. And the same is true in life. And that's what civility is. It's the rules of the road, it's the rules of life. It's how we treat each other. It's what our parents taught us when we were little, to say thank you, to say you're welcome, to say excuse me. It's those little rules that govern our life that as adults, we tend to forget those little simple rules of treat others as you would like to be treated. That's what civility has done for me in my life. It's allowed me to see the world totally different. It's allowed me to create peace. It's allowed me to have empathy for other people. It's allowed me to have compassion for other people. And it's allowed me to appreciate human life.
It's really an amazing journey that you've been on, and I think it's inspirational that a judge basically took a chance on you, and the military turned things around for you, and now you are actively doing things not only in your community, but you're impacting people through this podcast, for example, in all 50 states. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to our audience, as I am every time that we release an episode and we get your letters and some of the comments that are really, really gratifying. This has been the Path Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Augie Ghilarducci, and we will be back with another episode in 2 weeks.